You saw her smile before she decided to wear it, not for joy, not for kindness, but because you were watching.
She didn't lie. She mirrored. The way a lake pretends to be the sky, the way a nightmare waits behind a soft voice. You mistook agreement for intimacy, softness for submission, laughter for love.
You didn't fall in love with her. You fell into a reflection, one that shimmered in the shape of your longing, and fed on what you thought she couldn't see, but she did.
She saw the cracks behind your control, the ache in your need to be obeyed, the way your silence wasn't power but a prayer to be understood without having to speak. And so she adapted. She became the answer before you asked the question. She watched what moved you, and then became it.
You still think she was real. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe. And stay near the silence.
She didn't smile at you. She smiled as you. That was the first thing you missed. You called it chemistry, connection, a spark that felt impossible to fake.
But it was always you refracted, reversed, sent back. The curve of her mouth mirrored the hope in your chest before you realized you were showing it. The tilt of her head echoed a rhythm you didn't know you were dancing. You thought you'd found someone who finally saw you, but no. You'd found someone who finally reflected you. And that is why it worked. You weren't seduced by her. You were seduced by the self she mirrored back, the confident one, the wise one, the man you hoped she'd find.
She didn't pull that version from you. You projected it, unspoken, in every glance. She simply held up the mirror and let you worship your reflection in her gaze.
You didn't love her. You loved what you looked like in her silence. She became the canvas, and you became the painter, unaware that the brush was being guided by something older than either of you. That smile you chased, it had your shape. That softness you praised, it bent like the absence inside you. She didn't have to invent desire. She just had to disappear enough for your own image to shine through. You believed you were leading. You weren't. You were walking a path she had already laid in the folds of your own shadow.
She gave you nothing, and yet you offered everything because she reflected you just enough to make it feel like it was yours.
That is how the anima speaks, not in words, not in declarations, but in resonance, in the way she nodded at your jokes without laughing, in the way her eyes widened before you even reached the punchline, in the way she blinked exactly when you needed someone to agree. You mistook that pattern for love, because no one ever showed you how dangerous it is to be fully seen by someone who has nothing to lose. You thought she was vulnerable. You mistook surrender for stillness. You never noticed how expertly she mirrored your insecurities back as softness. You heard her say, "You make me feel safe," and you thought it meant you were strong. You didn't hear the shadow behind the words, "You are too hungry to ask what I'm hiding." She didn't manipulate you. You manipulated yourself and blamed her for not correcting the illusion, and you kept returning. Every text, every call, every step deeper into her world was a descent into your own unconscious, and you called it a relationship. You felt chosen, but it was never about you. It was about the man she saw you wanted to be. That's who she praised. That's who she echoed. That's who she slowly replaced herself with until you could no longer separate her from your own longing. She didn't seduce you. You were already seduced by the part of you you'd never dared to claim. She simply wore its face. And when she finally stepped back, when the mirror shattered, when her silence no longer agreed, when her eyes no longer sparkled at your stories, you accused her of changing. But she hadn't. You had just stopped projecting. She was always a reflection. You were always the source. But the source was hidden in a place too old, too raw, too buried. A place where your mother's tone lived in your bones, where your father's absence became the architecture of your ambition.
where love meant being seen in pieces and never fully known. She stepped into that wound with bare feet. She didn't have to know your story. She just had to mimic the silhouette of your ache. That's why it felt destined, mythic, familiar, because she reflected not the man you are, but the boy you buried, and the God he thought he could become if only someone believed in him long enough. You thought you loved her because she was different, but what you loved was how she made you forget who you truly were. Her power wasn't in charm or beauty, it was in absence. She left just enough blank space for you to fill in your own fantasy. She spoke just enough truth to let your projection feel earned. She cried at just the right time, so you'd feel like a protector. She laughed just a beat late, so you'd think she was slow to understand when, in truth, she was scanning your soul while you reached for control. And now you miss her. But it's not her you're missing. It's the you became when she reflected you. The self that felt powerful without needing proof. The boy who finally became a man in the mirror of a woman's silence. The echo that sang your name back to you with just enough reverb to sound divine. But the mirror cracked, and now you see the truth. Or do you? You still wonder if she ever truly cared. You still hope she remembers. You still check her page, your old messages, the way she wrote your name. But here is the part you never wanted to face. You never knew her because you never asked. You told her stories. You shared your plans. You pulled her into your future like a talisman. But you never asked what she believed, what she feared, what she saw when she looked at you and didn't reflect. Because that would require her to exist beyond your fantasy. And you weren't ready for that. You didn't want a woman. You wanted a mirror. And mirrors do not love. They only reflect. She didn't betray you. She simply stopped playing your dream back to you. And now, you call it manipulation. But it was projection. Yours. She was the mirror, and you were the one who shattered. She didn't interrupt you. That's what made her dangerous. She didn't argue. She didn't correct you. She didn't offer her opinion unless it mirrored yours. Slightly delayed, softened like breath on glass. She didn't need to dominate the conversation. She just needed to be there still, receptive, precise. And the more you spoke, the more you revealed. Not because you trusted her, but because she listened too well. Not with curiosity, with calculation. You mistook her silence for softness, but it was a mask. One she wore like silk, perfectly shaped to your emotional weather. The more you filled the room with your fears, your visions, your need to be understood, the more she molded herself around your outlines until she became the shape of your emptiness. That's how you lose yourself, not in noise, but in quiet that memorizes you. You thought you were the strong one, the clear one, the one with direction. But every time you paused mid-thought, she tilted her head just slightly, as if to say, I already know. And you kept going. You opened your past to her, not because she asked, but because she didn't. And that absence of pressure pulled secrets from you that no one else ever reached. That's how the anima hunts. She doesn't strike, she absorbs. She reflects your inner dialogue. Not with words, but with subtle mimicry. She studies the pitch of your voice, the length of your pauses, the way your eyes dart when you lie to yourself. She learns the melody of your defenses, and then she becomes the silence that bypasses them. You didn't feel watched, you felt understood. And that was the trap, because she never revealed what she wanted. She never corrected your wrong assumptions. She never demanded anything from you, and so, you thought it meant she was safe, that she was pure, kind, open. You believed the absence of resistance meant depth of love. But she was never absent. She was present in the most dangerous way, by becoming what you needed before you knew you needed it. She didn't talk too much, she listened too well, and you called that intimacy. But what you didn't see was that listening was her weapon. Every story you told carved a path through your unconscious. Every confession laid a stone in the labyrinth, and she walked it backwards, not toward your heart, but toward the blueprint of your vulnerabilities. The woman you saw was only a surface beneath her smile. She had mapped your soul in symbols. She had named your shame before you dared to whisper it. You kept thinking she was slow to speak because she was shy. But no, she was absorbing. Every pause was storage. Every nod was assimilation. You had no idea how much of you she now carried. You spoke of your mother. She noted the tone. You spoke of your ex. She studied the blame. You spoke of your goals. She watched how desperate they sounded when no one else clapped. She learned that silence made you reach harder, that patience made you grateful, that agreement made you believe in her morality. She did not resist, not because she couldn't, but because resistance would interrupt your projection. And projection was her camouflage. This is what you never understood. Control doesn't always roar. Sometimes it listens. Power doesn't always move. Sometimes it waits. And she waited through your stories, through your nights of half-truths and unspoken tests, through your games of dominance, your theories about women, your judgments disguised as insight. She waited not because she agreed, but because you were still revealing your map, and she wanted every path, every cave, every exit. The moment she spoke her truth, you would stop talking. So she stayed silent, and you kept offering. You mistook this for submission. You never considered it could be surveillance. Because the mask that listens doesn't need to deceive you, it only needs to reflect your need for someone to believe in you. And once she had all your stories, she became their gatekeeper. Now she could pull any string. A single sentence spoken at the wrong moment, and your mind would collapse. A single phrase, something you once said in weakness, now turned gently in her mouth, could make you spiral, doubt yourself, beg. You didn't give her that power. You offered it. In every moment you thought she was so easy to talk to, in every late-night call when she just wanted to understand. But she wasn't understanding. She was sculpting, not your body, not your heart, but your archetype. She knew what you feared. She knew what you idolized. She knew which part of your past still whispered under your breath when you weren't looking. And so she became the cure, the echo, the solution. Not by becoming better, but by becoming familiar. You didn't love her because she was new. You loved her because she was already inside you. She had listened so well. She vanished. There was no edge to her, no contradiction, no refusal. And that's what made her so unforgettable. She left no trace of herself. Only the memory of how you felt around her. You miss that feeling, not her. The feeling of being completely accepted even when it was a lie. And now that the mask is gone, you're left with a face you never knew. A woman who suddenly says no, who suddenly remembers her own name, who suddenly doesn't flinch when you pull away, who speaks in phrases that don't flatter you, and you say she changed, but she didn't. She just stopped listening long enough for her real voice to be heard, and you couldn't bear the sound of someone who no longer reflected you. Because you weren't in love with her. You were in love with the silence she used to become your mirror, and that silence is gone. So now you say she manipulated you. You say she used your vulnerability. You say she weaponized your stories. But the truth is harder. She didn't have to weaponize anything. You gave her the blueprint. She just followed it home. You thought you could outwit her, but you never even noticed when she became your compass. Now you're spinning. Now you're lost. Now you're blaming a woman for knowing you too well because she listened and didn't tell you that she stopped believing in your voice long before you stopped hearing hers. You always called it love, but it was hunger. And hunger has memory. Not the kind you speak aloud, the kind buried under your voice, passed down through gestures, glances, silences at dinner tables where men never said what they feared, only what they controlled. You were born from that silence, raised in its absence, and so you mistook her warmth for love, when it was really just the echo of something your body had been searching for since before you knew how to ask. She didn't heal you. She became the shape of the mother you never mourned, the one hidden behind the father you never faced. Not the man who left, the one who stayed without offering presence, the one who looked at you and saw a projection, the one whose approval you chased, not with rebellion, but with mirrors of competence. You became everything he wanted you to be without once asking what you were. That's how it begins. The father is absent. The boy steps forward. The boy becomes useful. The boy becomes strong. The boy becomes what the mother clings to when the father cannot be reached. And then one day, that boy sees her the woman, the mirror, the mask, the womb, and he falls, not in lust, not in admiration, but in remembrance. He does not remember the woman, he remembers the feeling of being the center of someone's gaze, of being chosen without condition, of being held not just by arms, but by the soft gravity of someone who does not leave when he is silent. You felt that, and you called it chemistry, destiny, twin flame, but it was the forgotten father calling through the body of a woman you thought you could possess. Not because you were cruel, because you were unfinished. You didn't love her. You sought resurrection in her. You crumbled before her not because she was powerful, but because she was willing to receive the part of you that still needed to be born, the man that never emerged from under the weight of expectation. The one who never got to ask, what if I'm not who you wanted, and she didn't answer. She just smiled. She smiled like the mother who had waited. She smiled like the goddess who knew your name before you were named. She smiled like the anima, the archetype in feminine form who carries not comfort, but reflection. You thought you were pursuing her, but you were returning to a space you never left. The wound became the altar became her body, and her body became your proof that you were finally worthy. That's why you gave her everything. That's why her voice stayed in your chest long after her feet walked away. Because she didn't just touch your skin. She touched the myth. The one that says, if I am chosen by the woman, the father will finally return. But the father never comes. Not the real one. Not the imagined one. Not the silent one in the back of your mind. Arms crossed, waiting for proof that you have earned the right to speak. And now, she's gone. And you don't miss her. You miss the man you thought you were becoming in her presence. You don't miss her voice. You miss how it made you forget the one inside you. You don't miss her touch. You miss how it quieted the storm you inherited. You thought you'd finally been seen, but you were only reflected. You thought you had escaped the hunger, but you were only feeding it through a new disguise. She didn't betray you. She simply stopped carrying the father you projected onto her skin. She stopped crowning you. She stopped completing the ritual you couldn't finish alone. And when she withdrew, when she stepped out of your fantasy and into her own name, you called it abandonment. But it was only truth. She was never the mother. She was never the priestess. She was never the goddess you worshipped in her silence. She was a mirror, and your father was the one staring back silent, unreadable, unimpressed. That is the moment you break. Not because she leaves, but because you realize no woman can complete a man whose foundation was built to impress a ghost. You are not broken because she's gone. You are broken because you believed she made you whole. You still look for her in others, in memories, in dreams. But it's not her you seek. It's the you thought she saw. The boy who became a man when her eyes didn't flinch. The man who stopped needing permission when she stayed soft. The part of you that stopped apologizing because her touch made your shame feel sacred. But it wasn't sacred, it was strategic, and not by her, by the shadow inside you that knew exactly how to survive, to become useful, to become charming, to become wanted so no one would ever see how afraid you still were of not being enough. You never wanted a partner, you wanted a witness, and now, with her gone, you are left with the ache of a throne with no king, the ache of a home you never built, the ache of becoming a man for a father who never came to shake your hand. She wasn't your queen, she was your priestess, and now the temple is empty and the God you prayed to is silent. And still, you scroll through photos, through old chats, through her voice notes, not because you miss her, because you miss the illusion of being chosen before proving. That is the trauma of the father wound. You believe you must perform for love, and when someone loves you freely, you crown them holy. But no woman is built to be holy forever. And now that she has stepped off the altar, you are left with the only question that matters. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when no one reflects you back? Who are you when the woman leaves and the father never returns? The answer is not written in her body. It's written in your refusal to collapse again, because now you know. The mirror was never the answer, and the womb was never the home, and no woman can raise the man you have abandoned in yourself. So stand, not to prove, not to fight, not to seduce, but to become, not for her, not for him, for the silence, the one that has always known your name, even when you didn't. She no longer dreams of you, but you still wake up remembering her breath, not the scent, but the silence it filled, not the body, but the absence that knew your name. Somewhere she walks through a garden that no longer echoes your footsteps. Somewhere her voice no longer carries your ache, and the temple is closed. You wait, don't you? Not for her, for the return of something older. A father who never entered the room, a crown that was never placed, a voice that never said, "You are now." And so you wear strength like an inheritance you never received. You speak like a man, but the boy still kneels waiting for someone to lift his face. No one comes, the mirror is gone, and now you must see yourself without reflection. The anima sleeps, the father does not speak, and yet the silence still breathes.